They burned my birth certificate in the rain, called me a parasite, while the guards changed the locks, and somewhere across the street, a black Mercedes idled with its engine humming like a secret waiting to be told. Have you ever watched your whole life slide into a puddle while the people who should protect you look away and pretend they can't hear you knocking? If it were you, what would you have done? My name is Amina, and this is the day I learned that kindness needs a backbone, that love without paperwork can be erased with a pen, and that a promise my father whispered with his last breath could turn a storm into a sunrise. If you're new here, drop a comment with where you're watching from and whether you think this could happen in your town, because in my neighborhood, people see injustice and quietly pull the curtains, you know what I mean. I came from Red Earth and Talking Drums, a Gero village where my father, Babatunde, could make fabric. Sing the loom, clacking like a heartbeat, colors braided into stories older than the road to Lagos. My mother Aduni had a voice that could calm a crying child from 2 courtyards away. And the day she left this world, she pressed my cheeks with thin hands and said, "Amina, your kindness will be your crown. Morning finds the pure in heart. Don't let the night convince you otherwise." I nodded because that's what children do when they don't understand. But those words lived in me like a small lantern that never went out. It was just Papa and me for a while. Bowls of hot oji at dawn, the workshop smelling like palm oil and dye, neighbors stopping by to ask his counsel on price or pattern. And then one market day, a woman arrived in perfume and silk. Folake eyes like polished stone compliments, like sugar that dissolves too fast. People said Papa deserved a second chance at happiness. She moved in, and with her came Kem, her son, a teenager already rehearsing a man's arrogance. At first we laughed. More ate better told ourselves this must be what a whole family feels like. And then the small cuts started so tiny, you'd miss them if you weren't the one bleeding. My regional academic award met her sudden headache. My graduation dinner became a toast to Kem's average football season. There were remarks about village girl dreams and dusty books, and whenever I entered a room in mid-whisper, the whisper died like a candle pinched between 2 fingers. Yeah, that happened. Then came the paperwork games, a university letter that never arrived, an application that somehow went in late calls that ended when my footsteps hit the corridor tiles. Papa's laugh a little thinner, his hands a little shakier, him saying, "It's just business, my daughter," while his eyes looked like they were carrying a secret across a long bridge. One night, I woke for water, the moon sitting like a coin in a black bowl, and I heard Folake's voice slide through the dark, smooth, deliberate, "Yes, the new will is ready once he signs." Everything transfers to Kem as long as we never finish those adoption papers. He keeps talking about the girl, has no legal claim, legal documents are thicker than blood. I pressed my back to the wall and felt my life tilt, not enough to knock me down, just enough to show me how fast it could happen. 2 weeks later, the phone call came from Lagos. Papa collapsed. The hospital air smelled like bleach and fear. The machines kept beeping, as if they could hold time in place if they tried hard enough. He squeezed my hand with a strength he shouldn't have had and whispered in my cloth with the gold threads, "There is something important, something that will protect you when I can't." And before I could ask what he meant, the machines sang their terrible last song, and whatever was left of childhood left with them. Grief doesn't feel like crying. At first, it feels like being held underwater by a kind hand that says it's for your own good. The morning after the funeral, Kem knocked like a landlord, brought a folder thick with stamps and signatures that looked like my father's. "If you'd never watched him sign a ledger," he said. "There were debts so big we'd have to sell everything." He said, Mama decided, he said family. And then he looked me square and said, "You're not family." Amina, not legally, those adoption papers never got filed. This house belongs to my mother now. He placed new keys on the table like a magician showing you an empty hat, after he's already pocketed the dove, and I knew if I didn't move fast, they would erase not just my name on a line but the life behind it. The sky split open that afternoon, Lagos rain like 1,000 small hammers. Folake stood on the porch, under the awning, dry as a lie. She tossed my mother's wrapper and my textbooks and the wood carvings Papa bought me one splash after another. Then she held up my birth certificate with the hand of a woman who knows the power of paper and fire, and she burned it, the smoke curling like a smirk. Neighbors watched through curtains. The guards changed the locks with professional patience across the street. The black Mercedes idled, a slice of diamond cufflink glinting between raindrops, and I stood there in my wet uniform, thinking, is belonging really this fragile as family, this easy to edit? Do you think that's fair? I did the one thing I still could do. I slipped around the side of the compound, after dark, found the loose plank on the workshop wall, and slid into the place that still smelled like Papa's hands, chalk and soap and light oil. The masterpiece cloth hung in the corner, the gold threads catching my flashlight like a handful of sunlight. I ran my fingers along the hem and felt a ridge, small, stubborn like a secret, too proud to lie flat. I pried, and a tiny package fell into my palm, a brass key wrapped in cloth, and a storage drive that looked like nothing and weighed like everything. That's exactly when the flashlights cut, the dark guards shouting. Kem pointing Folake appearing at the doorway, with her practiced pity stealing from the dead. Now, she said, desperation makes criminals of us all, and somewhere beyond the square, the Mercedes purred, while a voice on a phone said, she found it, the drive is secure, now we wait. Here's a thing nobody tells you, rock bottom isn't a basement. It's a trap door that opens to another trap door. I slept under a bridge with the cloth for a blanket, and the drive tucked under my shirt. Like a heartbeat, people with nothing shared their soup. A woman named Ngozi kept watch while I washed. A boy with a chipped tooth showed me which socket in the bus station still worked. And at night, I opened the drive and started building a picture videos of meetings in restaurants, where the silverware shines and the smiles don't bank. Transfers stepping from account to account, like careful dancers, emails smoother than sermons. A pattern as old as greed: marry a widower, isolate the child, sign the paper, move the money, leave, repeat. It was a machine oiled by bribes and fueled by a loophole called unfinished adoption. If it were you digging through those files with rain in your shoes and your stomach loud enough to draw attention, would you keep going, or would you let the current take you? One morning, the Mercedes pulled up to my corner of concrete, like a ship docking at a forgotten island. The door opened quiet, and a tall man stepped out. Dark-skinned silver, threading his beard, like someone had stitched wisdom into it. Agbada hand-embroidered with gold, Italian shoes that had never met a puddle. He said my name like it was an old song, Miss Adebayo, and before I could flinch, he said, I am not your enemy. My name is Adebayo Okafor. Your father gave me my first job when I was a village boy, with empty pockets. He taught me business and how to carry myself. When I made my first million, I offered to repay him, and he asked for one thing: if anything ever happened to him, and his daughter needed a shield, be that shield, and I said yes. He told me he had been watching Folake's pattern for months, gathering evidence, waiting for the piece only I could bring, the drive I now had hidden in the lining of my fear. I didn't trust him. Trust is a bank account. You don't refill with promises. You refill it with receipts. So he gave me one. He took me to an office on Victoria Island, glass everywhere, the city looking small from the 47th floor, and in his conference room he pressed a button, and the wall became a map of what had been done to me and to others, transfers, flights, phones, a whole orchestra of corruption, finally being forced to play the same tune. And then he said, "Stick around, because what happens next will blow your mind." The doors opened like a scene change on stage, and in walked Folake with a lawyer in a suit too expensive for his conscience, and a police commissioner wearing more medals than effort. She tried honeyed concern, "Mr. Okafor, I hear you've been confusing my stepdaughter." And he raised an eyebrow and said, "Mrs. Oladipo. Or shall I use one of your other names?" Her smile twitched. The commissioner puffed his chest and pointed. "This young woman is wanted for theft, forgery, false claims, and Okafor didn't even stand. He just tilted his head and asked, 'How much did she pay you to fabricate those charges?' 'More or less than the 2 million you took to kill a fraud case in Kano 3 years ago.' And then the wall showed their dinner photo, their bank transfers, their voices caught on a wire. The commissioner started to sweat like the AC was broken. The lawyer said, 'Fabricated.' And Okafor said, 'I can prove everything. When you have time and patience, you can hire the best investigators in Africa.' And that's exactly what I did." Then he played a video, and the room forgot to breathe. My father on screen, pale but steady, sitting in a law office I didn't recognize, eyes clear, voice soft but certain. "If you are watching this, my beloved daughter, it means God has called me home and the predators have begun their attack. Everything I built belongs to you, Amina. The business, the house, the land, I have created a trust for your education and future to be managed by my dear friend Adebayo Okafor. A man of integrity, I have documented the attempts to forge my signature and manipulate the law. Do not be afraid." Folake's composure cracked like sugar glass. For the first time I saw fear where arrogance used to be. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. Okafor paused the video and turned to me. His shoulders changed, less steel, more human. "There is something else your father asked of me," he said. "He told me his greatest regret was not protecting you sooner. He asked me to do more than guard your inheritance. He asked me to be family, if it was right, and if you wanted it to love you, in a way that honors you, not owns you." I know what you might be thinking, timing, power motive. I had those thoughts too. Racing, slamming into one another. Kindness needs wisdom, or it becomes a weakness. Wisdom without kindness becomes a blade. Where is the balance, if it were? Would you say yes to love introduced by grief? Would you walk away and start from zero? Folake tried to derail the moment. "You can't buy a wife like a business," she snapped. "There are traditions," and Okafor nodded. "You're right, then." He pressed another button, the doors opened again, and drums walked in. Not a recording. Living sound. Praise, singers with voices that call ancestors to attention. Elders from Agero following behind their heads, lowered not from age, but shame. Baba Adesina stepped forward, with hands that had blessed my naming ceremony, and later failed to defend me. "Amina, my child," he said. "We were blinded by gifts, purchased with your own inheritance. We come to restore honor and ask your forgiveness." Palm wine on the conference table. Kola nut, where contracts had been signed an hour before, the gold-threaded cloth placed on my shoulders, the room turning from boardroom to sanctuary, with nothing more than courage and song. Outside, officers from a clean division were already in motion. The commissioner in handcuffs. Before he could hide his phone, the lawyer searched for the exit and found none. Folake stood very still, a woman doing the math and seeing all the numbers finally add up to justice instead of profit. Inside, elders asked questions in Yoruba about partnership, protection, without domination, provision, without ownership. And I said yes, not to a rescue, but to a life with a man who had been a debtor to my father and chose to repay his debt with integrity rather than convenience. Yeah, that happened. Making it right was messy, restitution always is, the business came back with interest. The house keys returned to my hand, bank accounts frozen and redirected to families she had harmed in other states. Kem sat across from me with a look I had never seen on him, not arrogance, not indifference, something like a boy who walked into a cave thinking it was a shortcut and discovered it was a well. He agreed to testify against his mother. In exchange for mercy and service, he cried. I believed him, and I didn't. Two truths can sit in the same chair. My childhood friend Tetope came to me wrecked, said she had passed along my university news for a little money, said she was sorry, said she was ashamed, and I told her, forgiveness isn't a door you swing wide without a lock. It's a fence with a gate and a schedule. I love you, but we rebuild slow boundary by boundary. 3 months later, we returned to the village for a second ceremony beneath the old tree that had once been a courtroom without walls. This time, children ran with ribbons, master weavers showed apprentices how to make the shuttle sing, the elders washed my feet with cool water and blessing. And when we opened the workshop again, it became more than a place to make cloth. It became a school, a refuge, a promise that tradition can feed tomorrow without starving today. We employ hundreds. Now we export patterns with stories woven into them. We pay apprentices on time, and every time someone finishes their first cloth, I drape my father's gold-threaded wrap over their shoulders and tell them it once hid a key and a drive and a future. Here's the part that starts arguments at dinner tables. Folake served 3 years. She came out, thinner, quieter, her eyes finally looking like they had seen themselves. She came to me without lipstick or defense, knelt, said, I cannot undo what I did, but I want to spend whatever years I have left, repairing what I broke. I did not answer. Then I took months. I asked elders to be wise since they had already been foolish. I prayed the kind of prayers that don't ask for a win, they ask for the strength to choose the most costly mercy. In the end, I forgave her with conditions, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to cut the rope I'd been pulling against my own neck. She funds clinics and school roofs with her own seized assets. Now she takes orders from a committee of people she used to buy. Does that make me naive or brave? Depends on who you ask. Do you think that's fair? I want to leave you with the question that keeps me honest. Should justice require a billionaire's promise to move? Or did my story just reveal how broken systems sometimes need unusual levers to budge? Are we comfortable with tradition fixing what the law refused to see? Or did we simply dress a wound in pretty cloth and call it healing because the drumming felt good? My answer changes. Some days, I won't lie, what I know is this kindness became my crown. But it only stayed on my head because wisdom held, the pin's community turned its face back toward me, and a promise my father made grew legs and walked through a storm to find me. If you made it this far, tell me which moment hit you hardest. The rain at the gate, the video on the wall, the drums in the boardroom. The forgiveness that still makes my own aunties argue with me at weddings. Would you have said yes to love tied to a deathbed promise? Would you have let Folake back onto the porch? Even with conditions, what does justice look like to you when the paper says you don't exist? Drop a comment. Push back. Tell me I'm wrong, or share the time someone's kindness saved you when a system tried to erase you. And if you know somebody who needs a reminder that their story isn't over, send this to them. Subscribe for more true-to-life folktales, where courage meets corruption and ordinary people refuse to stay small. I'll be in the comments reading every word, because this isn't just my story. It's a mirror we all have to look into, like it or not. You know what I mean.